Hi there, Dave Markham for You A Way of Life Tuesday night class. We've been working on the first principle that we covenant and to promote and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And as Kenneth Collier says, we're not perfect. We do not always live up to the rhetoric in our principles. Kevin Collier says in his book, Our 7 Principles and Stories in Verse. And I got to say, Reverend Ken is absolutely correct, right? So tonight we're going to talk about how to love your enemies. Jesus says, interestingly enough, that to love your brothers and sisters is not enough. You know, even the pagans do that. But loving your enemies, now, there is a stretch. How do you do that? And we live in a culture of revenge and vengeance, and we hate our enemies and wish them ill. Starts right at the top of the food chain when George W. Bush, God bless him, remember him, said in the State of Union address on January 29th, 2002, that there was an axis of evil. An axis of evil. North Korea, Iran, and guess who? Iraq, right? And they had weapons of mass destruction, and they all wanted to kill us. And he whipped us into a frenzy of fear, which led to the Iraq War, where we indiscriminately bombed Baghdad, children, women, civilians, everybody, in what was called shock and awe. And I'm sitting there thinking, as a Unitarian Universalist, there's something just not right about this, right? It kind of violates everything in our first principle that we covenant to promote and affirm, and that is the inherent dignity of every person. And then I'm looking at the death penalty, and I'm thinking, how much do we believe in the inherent worth of and dignity of every human being when in our name the state kills some of them? Something wrong here, you know? And then you turn on the TV and you watch all these snarky TV shows where people are personally attacking each other and they're conniving and backstabbing. And, we live in an extremely competitive society. Vince Lombardi solely said, winning isn't the best thing, it's the only thing, right? And so we want to win often at all costs. And we live in a society that's very much into power and control. It's not serving others or helping others. It's in beating them. And so maybe it's a stretch. I could be in a bad mood. It just seems that we rarely see examples of people rising above their fears and animosity and desire for vengeance and retribution, and exhibit a love for one's enemies, which Jesus said we should do. Now, you might ask, well, why is that? Maybe it's just basic to human nature. Well, I have a little theory as a psychotherapist about that. John Bradshaw said the basis of all compulsive behavior, which usually gets manifested in addictions, whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex or gambling and greed and money and sometimes even workaholism, right? Or compulsive overeating, whatever the compulsive behavior is. It is generated by what good old John Bradshaw called a hole in the soul. A hole in the soul. And the hole in the soul comes from our innate sense of defectiveness and inadequacy. Deep down, if people are onions and we have layer on layer on layer on layer on layer till you get right down to the heart of the person, most of us live in terrible fear that we're defective or inadequate in some way. And we're very ashamed of ourselves. Now, in the Course of Miracles, it says that shame comes from the separation. When we told God to go screw himself, that we're perfectly fine, we can run our own life, we don't need him, we felt guilty. And then as life goes on, things don't work out, and we realize more and more that, well, we're not in control of our own lives, right? The first step in AA is my life is unmanageable. I made all kinds of promises to myself and other people I wasn't going to drink anymore. And you know what? In spite of my best promises, I wind up drinking again. And so the first step on the road to recovery, believe it or not, is to admit our powerlessness, that we cannot control our own lives. And you know the joke, which is, if you want to hear God laugh, tell her your plans. Right? And Shakespeare says the best made plans of mice and men go asunder, right? So things never quite work out the way we intended or we wanted. And as the Buddha said, all human suffering is caused by attachment. We get attached to certain people and things and outcomes. And when they don't occur, we suffer. And that suffering is something that we set ourselves up for, right? So the basic idea here is we have this inherent sense of defectiveness and inadequacy, which gives rise to shame. Very often Bradshaw says that sense of defectiveness and inadequacy is born out of abandonment, rejection, neglect as children. So when you're a small child, mommy and daddy aren't there for you, or they're abusive to you. Obviously, they are not a nurturing presence that you can turn to or expect is going to meet your needs, right? And so one of two things happen. Either you turn into an angel or you turn into a devil. The angel says, well, maybe if I'm prettier or more handsome, or if I'm smarter or harder working, or if I'm kinder and can get mommy and daddy's approval, then they'll love me. Or it can go the other way and says, the heck with them. They don't love me anyway. If they think I'm stupid, I'll give them stupid. If they think I'm bad, I'll give them bad. I'll show them, right? Or a lot of us have a little of both. There's part of us that become people pleasers and we want to gain the approval and love of others. If only we could be prettier or act right. And of course, our advertising industry just exploits that sense of inadequacy and defectiveness, that if only we could improve ourselves in any number of ways, then we'd be more lovable, right? Or it can go the other way, where you get a chip on your shoulder and you decide that if they think you're stupid or bad or ugly, you'll give them stupid, bad, or ugly. And most of us, myself included, struggle with that. I mean, sometimes we're people pleasers and we want people's approval and love, and we do anything to get it. And other times we have a screw you attitude. And then, what happens to make ourselves feel better is we selectively perceive that people who are worse off than us. So we say to ourselves, usually unconsciously, well, I might be bad, I might be defective or inadequate, but I'm not that bad. That person's far worse than me, and we tend to mock them and ridicule them and put them down, or want them punished in some way because it's the very thing about ourselves that we hate, and so we tend to see it and hate it in other people. Good old Dr. Freud, God bless him, he called that projection, And of course, Jesus says, If you see a sliver in somebody else's eye, get the log out of your own first, right? Okay, so I think a lot of times another trap that we get caught up in is a sense of narcissism and false arrogance. You know, sometimes some people or we get the sense that we're special. Uh, One of my favorite bumper stickers says, "You're unique just like everybody else." All right, so we're all special. Gifts for everybody, prizes for everybody. And we seem to be in that age where we're living with pretension and condescension, and everybody gets prizes no matter their performance. And so it gives rise to a false sense of importance and specialness and entitlement. And so we live in an age where many of our children and adolescents and even adults grow up feeling very entitled. And so when they get out in the real world and they find out that they're not as special as mommy and daddy told them they were, or their teachers, it's kind of a rude awakening, right? So this idea about the inherent worth and dignity of every person has nothing to do with behavior. You don't have to do anything to earn it or merit it. The inherent worth and dignity of every person is your birthright. You are a child of God. You're an extension of God's creative life. And we respect that. Namaste is a wonderful Hindu acknowledgement of other people, that I see the spirit of God, divinity within you. Peace Pilgrim said a similar thing. She said, I look for the divine spark in every person, and then I focus on that. And that's a good spiritual practice. Here are some very tough questions for your homework. Who do you feel better than, and why? Rebecca Solnit has a wonderful little paperback out called Men Explain Things to Me. And she is a very smart, capable journalist. And she goes on in this book describing how men of power and position kind of take the little lady under their arm and explain things to her, and are very condescending and patronizing. And she goes on to describe this in a feminist perspective as power and control, which leads to rape and domestic violence and other kinds of domestic abuse, where people feel they're better than somebody else. So do you think you're better than somebody else? And if so, why? Do you think that the first principle applies more to some people than to others? In other words, some people do have inherent worth and dignity, and other people are idiots. And you don't like them for some reason. You don't like their religion. You don't like their skin color. You don't like their sexual orientation. You don't like their poverty. You don't like their behavior. Whatever it is, you've got an issue, and you dislike them. So who's that group you don't like? We're all prejudiced and bigoted in some way. So who's your favorite target of derision and judgment? Third, how do you keep this judgmentalism in check? How do you overcome it? Like Peace Pilgrim says, I look for the divine spark in every person, and I focus on that. I think that's great advice. There's so much garbage, so much nonsense that every soul is encrusted in. And it's like we've got to drill down below the muck and the crust and the dirt to get to the brilliant diamond within, right? I personally find one of the things that helps me is a sense of humor. There's a great blessing in recognizing the paradox in life, or the absurd and incongruous. And while tragedy very often is not funny, and obviously we don't again want to mock people or ridicule them or engage in satire or snarky behavior, nonetheless, sometimes the common denominator with people we don't like is a little bit of humor. So I imagine Jesus hanging on the cross, and some of his last words are, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." And 2,000 years later, as we tell this story of the crucifixion, that's absolutely true. They didn't know what they were doing, did they? And I aspire to be like Jesus and have a cosmic consciousness, to have a consciousness, to be enlightened at that level where I can rise above the people who have perpetrated and committed huge injustice and abuse. And say, sincerely, well, maybe with a little laugh, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." I'm very happy to covenant with you to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And thank you for joining me for this second class. Your comments are most welcome, and I'll look forward to seeing you for our next session. Bye.